All right, thanks, Philip. Okay, guys, as Philip said, we're going to talk about lead levels in eagles trapped on the MPG ranch. These are just some of the players. Of course, Adam and I, Kate, and Heiko at the university does all of our blood analysis in the lab. A little bit of background on me. Again, I structured this talk for people who don't really know me or the organization. So real quick anyway, we started looking for migration hotspots in the 90s. A lot of that was in the Bitterroot Valley. Fall Rogers Pass site we got on in 99. We began full-time monitoring in 2000, and then we incorporated in 2004. And if some of you are going to see I repeat slides and talks. Some of our projects, of course, migration monitoring, which is really turned out to be a great thing on the MPG ranch in both spring and fall for the raptors. Satellite tracking of adult golden eagles, banding, wing tagging as part of the mark recapture. Lead and mercury analysis. For this talk, of course, we're just sticking to the lead. Determining gender via measurements of the birds. Isotope analysis to determine natal origins. And a host of other projects, including satellite work with osprey, and yeah, it goes on, kestrels and so on. Just bringing it to speed here. This is our little trapping blind. This is out near Lincoln. You know, to date, 250 eagles we've had in hand, blood sampled 220, give or take, and wing tagged a little over 200. So we've been busy. Of course, like I say, I structured this talk for people who don't know exactly what we're doing, but you all, of course, do, the Bitterroot Valley and then the ranch. And so we're pretty much looking at this region for this wintering study on eagles, although what we're learning with the satellite telemetry, they can go anywhere. Just to look at the ranch, of course, many of you who work on the ranch, well, all of you do, are familiar with our woodchuck bait and our pea pine and leave us alone, we're trying to catch eagles and all that, you know. I apologize, we're done now pretty much, guys. We have one, we're gonna try and get one of these residents up here, but then we're out, so no more having to worry about our bait stations. Different than the fall work that we do, when we're trying to capture these wintering eagles, we use a net launcher. Our friend, colleague, Brian Bedrosian, he and his dad built this net launcher, and it basically, what do they say, necessity is the mother of all inventions, and well, he came up with this idea using these padded projectiles for training Labradors, retrievers and whatnot, and they built it up 20-foot by 20-foot net. We remotely trigger it from up to a half-mile away, and if all goes accordingly, it'll shoot about 5 paces and cover the bird. In order to do this, we're working with carrion, so we go around and we collect a lot of dead things, and that's actually the bigger part of our job than actually even holding and dealing with the eagles. We spend a lot of time looking for dead stuff. Here you can see Ross is very excited. You have to get pumped about these dead things. When you go to the carcass dump, I mean, you got to take on this mentality. So Ross is jacked because we got a moose and like 3 deer, and then here's a headless elk. And there's our net launcher back there. And this season alone, since November, 20 deer, 2 elk, a moose leg, 1 cow from Bob, and 4 cow calves. And if all goes, you know, when you get the bird, these are colleagues in Seattle who use the same launcher that we do. They, of course, work with bald eagles and ravens on the coast. And this is kind of the way it works. You get your bird on the bait, fire the net, and you hope it gets covered. Seems like every time somebody's watching us on the camera, we don't catch the bird. In this case, we do, and we have to carefully extract the bird from the net. They get really tangled up in here. I'm sure shortly after, a minute after this picture was taken, we put a hood on that bird to make it easier to deal with. And we've never, you know, never hurt an eagle. Sometimes we get hurt, but the eagle, so far, to our knowledge, has never been hurt. And you can see it's pretty messy in here, and you just got to get right in there. And then, you know, once you get the bird out and pack everything up, this is a nice little sunny shot. This is Kerr, of course, and this is with a young bald eagle, and then Adam with an adult. We were happy there. And this is bald eagles. I know we're talking mostly about golden eagles, and so in our sampling, we we select for golden eagles, but every now and then we'll get bald eagles. And then we start selecting for age when it starts to mess and integrate with our satellite telemetry work. So our sampling, I think we could have caught more eagles if we were just going for catching a lot of numbers, and we're going to adjust that. But and you guys see, I'm using slides again. This, you know, after 200 birds in hand, I guess I still don't know how to release an eagle, because this is 2011, and I use this to remind myself how not to release an eagle. I mean, I am really close to getting my eye bit, my nose bit. I don't know what I'm doing there. It looks like I'm dancing with it. I don't know how that happened. Anyway, so why did we start looking at lead? One of the things that got us looking at lead was we kept hearing about condors. Condors were being leaded in California as part of this reintroduction effort. They had to keep bringing birds in. So of 150 or so condors that have been released into the wild since '99, I believe, almost 20 have been hatched in the wild. 10 have had to be returned for permanent captivity because they just keep getting leaded. 84 are missing. Every year they have to try and capture the whole entire population a couple times a year to test them for lead, and of those captured birds they have to chelate a third of the population. And in 2012, 5 condors died, including 1 breeding female, which was a big hit. Even though we have a lead-free zone for the condor reintroduction zone, so to speak, which was a highly controversial legislation in California, the condors are wide-ranging and they don't recognize these boundaries. This is just some more condor data from '99 to 2011. In gray is the percentage of the population that's been tested. In yellow, we have low levels of lead, subclinical, just above background, below subclinical. And they equate that to recent exposure. And I did not have this slide explained to me, and I'm not quite sure why they would call that recent exposure, because they sample it. It's a time, you know, it's a time and space. Just you get that bird for 1 hour, you sample it, and it's gone. So if that level was going up, if the bird had just ingested the lead, it would be going up, or maybe it's on the downside. I don't know. I'm sure there's a reason for that. And the darker bars are for nearly acute levels, anything above 65 micrograms. And we measure lead in micrograms per deciliter. Just to put that into perspective, anything below 10 is background, and we'll talk about those levels. But anything around 100 will kill a condor. Anything around 300 will kill a person. So in 1991, as part of the bald eagle, because the bald eagle was endangered, it was discovered bald eagles were becoming leaded from feeding on wounded waterfowl or dead waterfowl that had lead shot in them. So they mandated a lead ban in the United States. Canada followed shortly thereafter. And subsequent studies have found that these eagles are still coming into contact with lead. Harmada in eastern Montana has found bald and golden eagles in the '90s, and then more recently he published a paper in eastern Montana along the Missouri. These birds are contaminated. Brian Bedrosian, raven and eagles in Wyoming, and this is in Teton Valley. Interesting about this, I just found out this morning that Grand Teton National Park is mandating lead-free hunting now. So due to Brian's work, and he has shown that when you voluntarily swap out lead for non-toxic alloys, they saw that percentage of the hunters that took the non-lead ammunition, that percentage of birds, same percentage of birds were not contaminated with lead. So they saw that drop, a 30% increase in hunters using non-lead alloy and a 30% drop in the levels of lead. So with that, the park is mandating that. I think that's really great. And our fall golden eagle work, over 50% of our birds, of 160, 170 birds sampled, show elevated lead levels. So clearly, it's still going on, and there's numerous other studies, but there doesn't seem to be enough study to really get the point home. And so I think the more work and the more projects that show up these results, maybe eventually we'll see a switch. And I think we're starting to see it. This is from Molly Trinnell with Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. That they have a really good comprehensive program there in terms of looking at the national level how many species are contaminated with lead. Minnesota, a lot of waterfowl hunting, a lot of upland game bird. And you see there's a lot of species, 31 species of raptor or scavenger, 51 species of waterfowl, mammals, reptiles, and a lot of animals still coming into contact with lead. So we catch a bird, as I talked about earlier, we hood it. There's Sharon, an old photo. Oop. Putting wing tags on, we bleed them, and then we take the blood samples and analyze them. And on site, we can analyze them with this little computer, and that'll give us a reading basically from 0 up to the acute level of 65 micrograms per deciliter. After that, the lab will give us a finer high scale reading. And what we have found is that the ESA, which is that little computer kit, and the ICP-MS are very tightly correlated. So we feel pretty confident that below 65 micrograms per deciliter, our machine is accurate. We did have one here that was kind of an outlier, and that was either a mistake that happened in the lab or in the field. There it is. So for the ranch, we've tested 35 eagles, 31 goldens, 5 balds, and our range is real low, 4.2 to 39 micrograms per deciliter. And it's interesting the levels of lead that we're seeing in the Bitterroot Valley and in the ranch. And our mean is right around 20, 19 or 20. 20 to 40 are subclinical levels, so we're real close. Or 20 to 40 is clinical, so this is subclinical. Or, well, I guess 10 to 60 is subclinical. These things change, we'll see. But anyway, what we're seeing is we didn't get any acute, and we didn't get any clinically exposed birds. But what we wonder is, are those levels going up? Are they going down? All the data suggests they don't remain static. Yeah, so that's something we want to look at. Adam put this together, and again, it shows all these subclinical levels here, and just a few in the background, none clinically exposed, and of course, we didn't get any acute. But what's kind of a frightening number is 89% of the birds are above background. I've never seen a study that showed that many birds above background. Again, it's just a moment in time when we sample these. Is that going up? Is it coming down? We don't know, but it is very interesting, and we're going to look at this a lot more closely as to why we're getting these sort of static levels. Like I say, we really don't know yet. It'll be interesting to see when we get the ICP-MS results back. So the effects of lead. It's long been known as a toxin to humans. It slows reaction time. It affects your nervous system. And up at 20 micrograms per deciliter, it starts to affect your nervous system. So if you're an eagle, and it has been shown that eagles and humans are similar in the effects of lead on their systems. If you're an eagle and you've been ingesting lead and you're up around that 25 micrograms per deciliter and you're starting to be affected neurologically, does that inhibit your ability to hunt? Does that make you more apt to feed on carcasses or seek out scavenging opportunities and therefore getting more exposure? It's just some thoughts that we have. Memory loss. I've never tested myself for lead. I'm scared to test myself for lead, honestly. Even though I don't mess around, you know, I'm not fishing with split shot in my mouth and stuff like I did when I was a kid. And again, this level is like a level for death in humans. And I put the human chart up there, and then you look at like the Center for Disease Control over the years. At one time, 60 micrograms per deciliter was an acceptable level for lead in the 60s. And then over the years, of course, it goes down, down, down to now 2 micrograms per deciliter. Anything above that, pediatricians are saying, you don't want your kids having any lead. And so if you're somebody who hunts and you feed your family from the game, you want to make sure you're not feeding your kids lead. I don't know what this WHO is down here. I know Environmental Protection Agency, Center for Disease. I don't know who that is. I didn't look, well, who that is. Okay, great. But anyway, I mean, there you go. When I was coming up as a kid, you know, you saw these commercials, don't eat the paint peeling off the walls. And not that I did that. Anyway. So effects of lead in birds, sort of the same thing you see in humans. Decreased reaction time and motor skills, which could affect hunting. the ability to transfer oxygen in the blood, kidney failure, muscular atrophy in the way of wing droop. We see this with the albatrosses is probably the best example for birds that I've seen on Midway Island and those islands out there where all those enclosures, those buildings that were built out there during the war, the paint is peeling off them and the albatrosses pick at that. And they're dragging their wings around because they can't lift them. They get this wing droop. And something that compares to that, I saw a talk once, is you look at the old renditions of artists from the 15th, 16th centuries, and they're painting with their wrist limp. And that's because they're suffering the same effect. So they got to hold their brush like this as they work the canvas because the paint was all leaded. Crop stasis, which is something that rehabbers see a lot, where a bird ingests a bunch of lead with the meat and it can't digest, and that'll kill the bird. And just a whole bunch of other physiological disorders. So where is it coming from? I think everybody in this room understands where a lot of the lead is coming from, and more evidence points to this. You could see these little fragments from one rifle, one lead core rifle bullet. This is a .270 Winchester. And just look at these stats of 38 gut piles that were analyzed. 94% of them had lead fragments. Of 20, 50% had over 100, 25% over 200, and all it takes is the tiniest amount of lead to be ingested by a bird to take it out. Just another look at this fragmented lead bullet. If it hits, even if it doesn't hit bone, it spreads through the meat, through the muscle tissue, up to 2 feet. The birds and scavengers, a lot of them are getting them from the gut piles, though, that are left behind. This is a kind of a neat slide. This is a ballistics gel. The top one you see is the copper bullet, and then this is a lead rifle bullet, just to give you an idea of the fragmentation. So if any of you, I don't remember what's going on the ranch. I know it's encouraged to use non-lead. I think that's a good call. And of course, the birds are getting it from opportunistic feeding. This was our first resighted bird. This guy had some raccoon or sheep carcasses out there, and that was '09. Number 9 bird. This was down in the Vermejo Ranch on New Mexico, one of Turner's places. They thought they had some wolves down there, so they put a camera on this carcass, this elk carcass. This is in Colorado. Again, these birds are scavenging in the winter. Animals die in the winter. I think, historically this is what they do. And also we know that jackrabbits and sage grouse numbers are tanked down to just percentages of what they originally were. And so these eagles, I think, more than ever now are dependent upon carcasses and maybe more apt to become leaded. So, things that we've learned. This number, again, I can't tell you how startling that was. We expected it. We know there's a lot of hunters in the Bitterroot Valley. It's a pretty populated place compared to other areas that we've worked in. But that is a high number. Again, though, the levels weren't real high, and that's interesting. Even though we recognize lead as a continental problem, we now know in western Montana and in this Intermountain region, it's a problem as well. Some of the stuff that we're learning about the Bitterroot Valley and the MPG ranch from Kate and Kerr's winter surveys, from our observations on the ranch, is it seems to be a real important area for golden eagles, especially in November and December. And of course, I think we all need to make that switch, and I think over time we'll see that, and hopefully we'll be able to measure that change in the birds over time. Our research and others going on across the country. It would be nice to be able to test birds before, during, and after, but that's tough. During the hunting season, we found it very difficult to catch birds because there's so many opportunities. One of the things we've talked about with Philip and Kate and Kerr and Adam and all that is it would be really cool, because you guys keep such tight records on what goes on the ranch. Once we get enough transmitters out there to GPS these gut piles and lion kills and see if we could start to chart the way these birds are seeking out carcasses. And of course, ultimately, when somebody looks at the human demographic, in particular kids in rural areas that are being fed a lot of wild game, that might raise some eyebrows and get people to make some switches, some healthy switches. And just, there's always a bunch of people, and that doesn't even scratch the surface of everybody that helps us. And with that, questions.